So this is my final presentation for Psychology 141 by me, Jaylene Sanchez. So we're going to start off with Chapter 13, which is Personality. And what is personality? According to our textbook, personality is described as our characteristic pattern of thinking, feeling, and acting. Development of personality. So according to Sigmund Freud, there are psychosexual stages that each person goes through. And there are 5 of the psychosexual stages, one being oral, which is 0 to 18 months, where the pleasure centers on the mouth, including biting, sucking, and chewing. Number 2 is anal, which is 18 to 36 months, and this is focused on bowel movements and bladder elimination, dealing with controlling that. Number 3 is phallic, which is 3 to 6 years, and this is moving the pleasure zone to the genitals and help coping with sexual feelings. And number 4 is latency, which is from 6 years to puberty, and this is when their dormant sexual feelings start to appear. And number 5 is genital, which is from age puberty on, and this is when sexual interests start to mature a little bit. So what are defense mechanisms? Defense mechanisms help a person reduce their anxiety by distorting their real reality. And as you can see in this picture, a tiger is getting a porcupine, but the porcupine's defense mechanism is to shoot its pokes out. And what are some of the defense mechanisms? So the first one is regression, which is retreating to an earlier psychosexual stage where psychic energy remains fixated. And an example of this is when a young child sucks on their thumb on the first day of school because they're nervous. The next one is reaction formation, which is switching unacceptable impulses into their opposites. So an example is a person takes their nervous feelings before an interview and turns it into excitement. The next one is projection, which is disguising your own threatening impulses by attributing them to others. So another example is if you are cheating in a relationship, you constantly think that the other person is cheating. Next, we have rationalization, which is offering self-justifying explanations in place of the truth, more threatening reasons for your actions. And one of the examples is a person smokes weed because it's quote-unquote the only way that they get hungry. Displacement is shifting sexual or aggressive impulses towards someone or something more acceptable and less threatening. This is an example of this is a person punches a wall after feeling a rush of rage instead of punching a person. And the last one is denial, which is refusing to believe painful realities, and this might be a child refusing to believe that their parent had just passed away. The next one is chapter 15, which is therapy. And there are many different types of therapies, but what are the types of therapies? So first, we have psychoanalysis and psychodynamic therapies. Psychoanalysis was created by Sigmund Freud to help people with repressed feelings become aware of them and reduce growth impeding on conflicts. And psychodynamic therapy was also created by Freud, which helps people focus on their problems they're facing now by looking into important relationships and childhood experiences and the relationship between the patient and the therapist. The next one is humanistic therapies, and therapists help the patient grow in self-awareness and self-acceptance, which also boosts their self-fulfillment. It promotes growth. It does not try to cure. A person takes responsibility for their feelings and actions instead of trying to cover them up. Conscious thoughts are more important than your unconscious thoughts, and the present and future are greater than the past. You can't change the past, you can only work on what's happening now and later. And this helps a person face their feelings as they happen instead of referring to their childhood. And behavior therapies. So behavior therapies, The therapists believe that the problem with behaviors are the problems, and classical conditioning is huge in this, and it was created by Ivan Pavlov. And an example of classical conditioning is if we eat something and we throw it up, we might be scared to eat it again. Exposure therapy is the next one, and it's the idea to try to reduce a person's negative reactions to something by continuously exposing them to the source of fear. Instead of a person trying to avoid the source of fear, they are forced to face it head on and adapt. This is usually used for people with phobias. Aversive conditioning. So this creates a negative response to a harmful stimulus. This helps a person understand right from wrong, associates unwanted behavior and with an unpleasant feeling. And an example might be if a child draws on the wall, they might get spanked by a parent and then put in timeout. And this makes the child realize that they should not be drawing on the walls, and next time they think about it, they would think about the consequences that happened afterwards. So next we have psychopathology, which was chapter 14. What are some of the psychological disorders? Well, medical model. A medical illness says that a medical illness needs to be diagnosed based off of the symptoms of a person and what they're experiencing, and needs to be treated through therapy. The next one is biopsychosocial approach. And this emphasizes the fact that the mind and body are inseparable, and negative emotions equals physical illness, and the other way around. Physical illness equals negative emotions. We carry DNA and certain genes, and some of them might not always be noticeable. Some situations allow genes to be seen, and other situations allow genes to be more dormant. So the next thing is suicide, and this seems to be very common in today's society, and it seems to be sadly very normalized, and it shouldn't. So some of the statistics for suicide are: in the US, whites and Native Americans die by suicide twice as often as Hispanics, blacks, and Asians. Women are more likely to attempt suicide, but men are 4 times more likely to actually die from attempting suicide. People with OCD and quote-unquote perfectionists are more likely to attempt suicide because if they don't do something right, they feel a sense of failure. In the last half of the 20th century, the annual global suicide rates nearly doubled. Suicide rates are higher in people who are rich, divorced, widowed, and single, and there are ways to help, such as being there to listen and empathize for someone who might be having these thoughts. Help a person seek help by referring them to a counseling center, and spread kindness. You never know what somebody is going through behind closed doors. And finally, we have non-suicidal self-harm. So non-suicidal self-harm is very, very common now, especially in adolescents and females. Non-suicidal self-harm includes people cutting themselves, burning themselves, maybe hitting themselves, or putting things underneath their nails or skin. And people who do this are typically being bullied or harassed and are unable to cope with the stress and their emotions that they're going through. These people tend to be very hard on themselves and have trouble communicating their feelings, and sometimes have trouble solving problems too. And there are many, many reasons for people to harm themselves, and one of them is that the physical pain distracts from the mental pain and the stress that they are going through. So they might just do it as a distraction from everything that's going on in their real life. And some of them just seek attention, and that seems to be very common too, because some people just don't have parents that pay attention, and that seems to be the only way to get them to pay attention. And the next one is relieving guilt. The pain helps them feel like they're being punished for something that they did and something that they're guilty about. And the last one is it helps them feel like they fit in with their peer group. And that's not as common, but it still can be found in teens and young adults. And that is all I have for you. Thank you for listening.